Hey, we're on.
We do throw the bachelor party once a year. We try. All right, folks, and welcome to the September meeting of the ErieNet Local Development Corporation. Today is September 17th, and now it's 2:02 p.m. Brother Slater Mills. Here. Jason Keating. Here. John Spears. Here. Toe. Here. Mark Cornell. Here. Breezy. Here. Legislator Myers. Here. Dan Castle. Here. Meyer.
Here.
We do have a quorum. We'll note that Elizabeth Breeze is absent today. We are joined also by ACC's Matt Kreider and Fred Norder.
Yes.
Moving on to number 2, everyone has had the opportunity to acknowledge the minutes. If there are no additions, corrections, additions, I'll take a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mark Brunel. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions, anyone opposed? Abstention.
I'm just gonna do when I'm not there, sorry.
Gotcha. Here's, right, motion carried. We'll go right into the report of the chair, of which I'd like to go into executive session to discuss matter of personnel. If I can have a motion. That
Motion.
by Legislator Mills, second. Second by Breeden. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Abstention. If I can have just the directors and commissioners. You can
Turn that off.
I just Or back on. Back.
Okay, great. Just for the record, no action was taken in executive session. And we'll move right into executive director's report.
Okay. Well, first of all, I have a couple things to note. One, in your packet, there'll be an article that Martha wrote. Very good. Please take some time to read it. Do you want to talk about it at all?
I write often for a publication geared towards end users called The Stupid Name with No Jitter. It used to be called Very Respectable Business Communications Review, which sounded more dignified than No Jitter. But they came to me and asked me to write something about the Verizon Frontier acquisition, and I did. And as I got more into it, Missy and I talked about this, someone who's been rather vocal in his opposition. And I thought, well, I could quote him, but why would I want to give him extra publicity? So I didn't. And I just wrote about the transaction and how it potentially affects municipal broadband. So
Please take time to read it. Second, Courtney had a baby, which I announced. I just want to say that publicly, that she was doing very well. And they're home and they're a good baby, I guess. She sleeps a lot. I don't know how you get 2 babies like that. So I'm happy for her there, and everyone's well. Which leads me into why our board packets aren't as pretty as they normally are. We had everything prepared, but not everything was working right. On Friday, of course, Courtney's official first day gone. And so some things are not as beautiful as they are when Courtney is here. Something was wrong with our printer. Everything's fine now. We've got it all worked out. But if you notice anything that doesn't seem as pretty or looks as nice, it's because Courtney's not here. She should be back in January, but the content should be correct. Couple things to note here. So all of the financials are attached. Biggest thing to mention is we have moved officially from our AccuFund software to our new software, which is Soho Books. That took place at the end of August. And so that was a big transition. Courtney did a tremendous amount of work actually inputting all of our 2024 invoices in. And so that's complete. It's going well. The accountants are working in it and everything's fine. We also had quite a bit of investments. Both of those are in here for you to review, July and August, since we did not meet in August. And we had around the middle of every month, we have about 2.1 million coming out. In September, though, we had around a total of 4 million at two different disbursements. Of that, we took, or I'm sorry, just over 3 million. Of that, we took $500,000 out. We'll be doing that more regularly now of our investments. We are analyzing each month what we're spending, what we anticipate we'll be spending, and we're making those decisions. We're trying to come down to as little as possible that we have to take out. I think in August we got down to 30,000 in the bank, so we did a really good job in making sure that we are maximizing our investments as these months go on. And we're doing very well. I think we're at 2 million for our investments that we've. I think today was around 2 million that we've earned in a year and since July. So a year and 3 months, 2 months. So we're doing really good. And that's good. That's the investments. I'll go through mine, then we'll let Matt go into his report. We met with ConnectAll on 9/5. So I don't think we've met as a group. So we'll just discuss that a little bit. As you saw in the email that I sent out in July or August, ConnectAll, Josh Breitbart did contact me and let me know that our application for the MIP grant was going to be put on hold. They're not denying it because they want to fund us, but the MIP program, we decided, and it's kind of a mutual thing, was probably not the best way to fund it. And there were some changes from the original grant, even from the original conditional acceptance letter that we had. The program really moved towards more of an end user, a last mile commitment. We are not a last mile provider, we're a middle mile provider. As you will recall from several of our conversations, we adjusted the grant to try to include around 10,000 B customers that we would try to do the last mile piece for. It was a stretch. And in our opinion, as our group, our internal group that's met several times since then, it was probably for the best that we did not move forward with that project. Now, that doesn't mean walking away from 23 million, plus or minus dollars for Erie County in general. However, in that conversation with Josh, as I alluded to in the email, we were going to meet at the end of August to discuss potential other funding that would work better with a middle mile network. So we had that meeting on September 5th, and there are a couple things that came out of that. We have the opportunity to assist internet service providers with the affordable housing grant, which will potentially add business to ErieNet, which is always good, and allow us to obviously meet part of our goals, which is to reach and connect to those that are unable or not connected or in the lower income. So that is a project that we're working on with them. Also, he alluded to another funding source that they're reviewing. They have a few different programs that they're reviewing. He didn't go into detail about those programs, but thought that that might be a potential grant opportunity for ErieNet, and that won't be announced until towards December. I did ask him if it's ARPA funding that they're going to be using, and it is. And so hopefully whatever type of project that does gear towards more middle mile is something that we would be ready to deploy quickly, given the fact that, again, we're still on an ARPA timeframe, which we would only have at that point 2 years to complete the project. And really not even a year. Yeah, yes.
How are they getting?
No, 2 years.
The obligation.
Obligation fee.
3 months.
I don't know. I have to complete by 26.
Yeah. Well,
And you have to have your expended by 25. So we have a year to do that, and then 2 years to complete the project. So it's still doable in our minds, depending upon what the project is. We haven't gotten any information.
The work funding timeline, right?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
They could be hurry up,
You would think.
could be in a sprint.
They have a lot of money. They've been expanding their programs. They've been extending their deadlines,
Except for us.
etc. So, but the good thing is, and I want to say is, I do think that they're listening to what we think would be a good program and use of that money. It was called a municipal infrastructure program, and the fact that municipalities couldn't use it to fund a middle mile is a question mark to me. But I'm not running the program, so I have to just go by what they're telling us. So hopefully, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. There will be that. The affordable housing opportunity is a good opportunity for us.
Whose affordable housing program is it?
It's Connect All.
Connect All has an affordable housing program.
Our play would be working with whoever that ISP is for those housing units. And we would want to encourage them to use ErieNet fiber. So it'd be a straight up lease or IRU back, but leveraging Connect All funding.
Do they have actual projects in Erie County?
They do.
I mean, actual
They have current projects in the city of Buffalo, and then they're expanding, and they're looking for our input as well on areas that they might be missing. For example, I always use Eden because I know Eden very well. There's a HUD housing development apartment complex in Eden. That's probably not on their map, and getting them connected with those so that rural low income could also take advantage of that funding as well.
Any potential studies on that? I don't know. Have you heard of?
Well, we did one. Well, not on the affordable housing, but we helped them with a grant that helped identify underserved areas and encourage them to utilize those areas as BEAD potential funding. And they're using it. And that's another announcement. I don't know if that's in yours, but they are using our areas that were suggested, which is very good. And they're using that as a definition of underserved. So that will help Erie County when the BEAD funding becomes available, which is another federal pot of money. So so stay tuned.
Bolsters the application.
Yeah, it helps. Yeah, it really helps. So that's Connect All. The town of Amherst we met with, they came to us. They have they're interested obviously in connecting and probably in, now that they don't have the MIP funding, they're still interested in connecting multiple buildings, which is beyond what our original 400 mile scope in Amherst was. So we had a conversation to kind of go through that with them, but also they're doing a communications project with their public safety, and we'll be able to assist with that project as well. So just an FYI that people are starting to understand more about how we can assist some of their other projects within their town, public safety being a big one of that. Which brings me into my next one, the street light connectivity efforts. We've been meeting with the Department of Transportation, the state one, Town of Tonawanda, and ITAC, the GR and BTC, and we're looking at ways in which we can leverage funding or leverage even planning money. The county is somewhat involved in this, although they're not on our regular meeting, and how potentially they can utilize ErieNet to be the fiber backbone for a street light public safety project that would help with police and fire with their street lighting and get smart lights in and around the county. There's also groups of people, this came up with Amherst as well, who are interested on the public safety side of helping the 911 system, and that needs fiber. So there's a lot of areas now in which we might be able to be partners on grant funding that we would not necessarily go after ourselves, but again, kind of like the affordable housing, where they would utilize ErieNet fiber to be the backbone of those particular projects. So stay tuned. Those are some of the updates, and we meet regularly. We're meeting again. We have found some potential grants that we can partner on, particularly for the streetlight project. All right, now. You're up.
Great. First of all, I'd like to introduce Fred Norder, who's with UCC Tech, and he's our financial analyst. He's been working on the budget and business plan. So he's going to talk a little bit about the 2025 budget. Is that to follow the ECC report, or are we just dovetailing in it?
It doesn't matter, however you want to do it.
I'll go through my short 2-page report. And a lot of this will be covered in the resolutions, but I'll give you the highlights. My first item, the ErieNet top at the Rath building, really should have that classified under construction because we're building that top. And yesterday was scheduled to have the cabinets.
They were delivered.
Delivered, so they did show.
They did show.
They're, I don't know if they're on site today installing them.
No.
That's to follow.
The problem is that they had, the construction has not completed the fire suppression system for the room yet. And they can't do any installation until the fire suppression system is installed.
Okay.
And once that's installed, we'll be able to install the rack, check the air cooling systems and put the curtains up, and then.
Are the racks in the room?
Yes, they're physically in the room. Yes,
Just not in the way of.
they're off in the corner right now until the fire suppression system, which
Time frame on that.
should be this week. We
Oh.
thought it was last week they were supposed to be done, but it's still uninstalled.
Yeah.
So,
All right, well, we still have time, but the fiber will be showing up soon.
well, that's good. I mean, they should be finished by the end of the month, everything,
So that'll work.
racks and all.
If you recall, we had an RFP for a construction project going across South Street and Niagara Street. Permits have been submitted, but again, that was somewhat delayed, or it has been delayed on our city agreement. The city agreement moving forward. Should be able to start scheduling that bridge construction work soon.
Oh, you know what? I should have been on my report. The city, well, I'm sure everyone's.
I was gonna wonder if you could say something. I thought.
Oh my gosh, so the city of Buffalo, well, it probably was on my original one, it didn't save. I had to redo on Friday, but, the city of Buffalo has agreed to the agreement, I should say the common council has allowed for the agreement to be moved forward and negotiated. There were one particular issue that came back on a red line with the city of Buffalo last week. Emails have gone back and forth, and I think it's going to be finalized and signed, which then we can move forward with the permitting process. So anyway, that's where we are. It's very good news. The Common Council has basically blessed the project.
And we don't have to go back in front of them.
We don't, no. So we just have to work on this one little issue, which is not a big deal. I think it's just an understanding problem. You know, we're not communicating correctly, or they're not understanding it right. I think that'll be wrapped up by the end of this week, and we should be able to have the permits. They're all there at the city, and as soon as the agreement is signed, they can sign off on the permits. Right, sorry.
Oh, that's good. We also have,
So that's in the city permits and inspections.
Yeah.
Right.
Catherine Anderson. Done it for us.
See her on Thursday.
Very exciting. Yeah, I mean, they have everything that we're ready for, they have, and they promised as soon as it's signed that they'll just sign those.
so we have co-location agreements that are being negotiated for 350 Main, that's directly across the street from the Rath Building. That's our main carrier hotel for Erie County, Western New York, and the Victory Technology Center in Lackawanna, VTC. We're very close to executing those agreements. The attorneys, both sides, have signed off. I believe they're now, I don't know if you're signing them first or they're signing and returning. They need to.
Waiting on the
sign and
signature,
return.
yeah.
So that's almost put to bed. We have a board resolution today for the village of Springville to bring our fiber through the village. We need to connect to approximately 225 poles. It's actually good news. At the time of this memo, we had estimated 325,000 to do that make-ready work, and that was based on what our pole costs have been for NYSEG. But because Springville is using their own municipal folks, and there's not any pole replacements, it's a much better number. The resolution's for 134,000. DES has been our engineering firm that's been doing the majority of our throughway and DOT permitting. In their original proposal to us, they had qualified and highlighted that detailed traffic control plans that might be called for by DOT would be an additional expense. That's because you couldn't estimate it at the time of the bid. And that was a qualification of the RFP. So these are the more complicated intersections for DOT, the Thruway Authority. And so they're saying they need an additional $85,000 to do the more comprehensive traffic control plan. There's also included in that number, and again, this is a good thing. We didn't think DOT would allow us to bore underneath 219, I think it is.
No, they're right. Wasn't
And if it's both.
Mhm.
So we had found a place where we thought the aerial construction would have minimal impact. But we still would be talking about shutting down more than 8 lanes of traffic. Both directions, we probably do half at a time. It would have been a significant maintenance of traffic operation. And so DOT and Thruway came back and said, just go under. It's just great.
Way under, right?
Well, yeah, there will be, I don't know, 20 feet.
Yeah, it's good.
But so essentially, I'm asking for more money, but it's saving us a considerable amount of money in construction.
Is it not possible to find some bridge and just put a conduit on an existing bridge crossing like we're?
Well, it's also, it's where we're trying to get to.
Oh, okay.
So we could go down to the bridge and we gotta come back up to get to it. So,
So is that just approval to go under anywhere or
just this one.
just
Specific.
specific?
So what we discovered just 2 days ago, I don't think we even told Missy yet, But outside of Springville, there's a crossing for 219. And again, we thought we would directionally bore under 219. That expense is going to be avoided because the Village of Springville has conduit underneath 219. And they have an open duct, and they will include it as part of their make ready for us. So that will save us several tens of dollars.
That's a future goal. They put it all besides conduit, we lease space to somebody else down there for that other, or.
Yeah, well, so so both the Springville and the DDS extras are actually helping our construction. Those two resolutions are coming up. Under make ready, we'll talk about grid. It's not, I don't have any positive news. But the NYSEG make ready, when we first went forward with our resolution, I think it was back in September of 23, we asked for $2.7 million for NYSEG make ready. And that was the make ready that we felt that ErieNet have to pay for to attach our cable. And we're still within that 2.7 million, running at about 2.4. The way NYSEG handles make ready is for our whole work that isn't ErieNet isn't causing that work, but NYSEG wants to perform that work, or NYSEG wants to replace that pole. We're having our contractor do that work, but NYSEG fully reimburses us for that. So that is what we asked for in April. We asked for an additional 2.8 million, and that was 2.8 million that we have to pay, then we get it back. And then likewise, we've identified another, I think, another total of 10.2 million. That again, NYSEG ultimately pays for it. And so that brings our entire NYSEG expenditure to $5,691,000. So
How quickly do you get that back? When they finish the make ready or when the fiber is done?
So good news on that. We don't pay our make ready contractor until ErieNet's reimbursed by NYSEG. So our make ready contractor does NYSEG's portion of the work, and it's in their contract. They then submit their payment application to us. We submit it to NYSEG, and then they write us a check and then we pay the contractor. So we really don't have a cash flow. And so that was clarified.
Yeah, that's good again. That's one negotiated for.
Fred and Missy keep more in the bank earning interest.
You may all know the answer to this. I don't, what's the difference between make ready construction and not make ready
Yeah,
construction?
so there's make ready assessment, make ready survey. So that's when we're paying the engineering firms to determine the make ready work.
Okay.
And then make ready construction is the actual.
Thank you.
So, so that's where we are with NYSEG. We want the authorization to commit the total make ready funds, but we're still within ErieNet's responsibility. We're still on target. So where are we with grid? Grid, we have nearly all of the poles that we want to attach to with grid. We submitted all of those, or 6,400. 5987 have been returned by the survey engineering firm as they've completed their assessment. And that's where we're getting stalled. That assessment's gone back to grid, and there's third-party violations on these poles, not caused by ErieNet, and And it's not that by attaching our line, we're going to need to lower or raise existing cables. We understand that that's our cost. We're not objecting to that. But we don't want to pay for violations caused by others that grid hasn't caught, right? The problem historically is grid only spot checks make ready construction. They do about a 5% sample. And if they go out and it looks good, they don't dig further. If they find issues, then they dig further. Well, they've been doing that for a long time, and there's just a legacy of violations on these poles. We could agree to pay for all these violations, but, you know,
We're not.
we can't, you know, and we're in the, then we are truly in tens of millions of dollars. And so, and Grid understands that. They don't expect us to pay for it. But this is the delay. They then go to Spectrum and they say, you're in violation. And then Spectrum comes back, no, we're not in violation. We're in violation because Greenlight put their cable above ours. And then, or Verizon, and it's all this finger pointed that they have to sort through and get these third-party attachers to pay, or at least agree to pay. And then it's different. Grid doesn't have our contractors do that work. They take care of that. So in a way, it's better the way NYSEG does it. You know, we're doing their work for them, but we're getting reimbursed.
So we avoid the delay.
So we've had, back in August, it's senior management, Thomas, Melissa, and myself, were on the call with Grid senior management. Grid understands the problem. We understand their issues. They're correcting, they're doing 100% inspection going forward. So this problem will over time be resolved. They still have the legacy of all these pole violations. And so they've asked us to be patient, told them we have been patient, but we need progress. This was almost a month ago. I think at the time, since that month, we went from 43 poles released to us to I think we're shy of 200.
It's not a circle.
Out of 6,400.
Out of 6,400.
And NYSEG,
This feels like an indefinite problem.
Well,
Just how-
it's an endemic, it's an endemic problem. There's just awful lot of broadband.
Yeah.
And so Grid is overwhelmed by it.
And we're not the only ones impacted.
no,
That's all right.
the whole state, yeah. And they have made some corrections. They, not on the actual process, but they brought in, what they told us on the meeting is they brought in a new crew, basically, that will be working on this, and new leadership, and they've done some rearranging, and they're hopeful that that will help move these things forward, but.
I guess given the current trickle of progress, if that were to persist, what does that actually mean towards our ability to meet time?
Half of the county is in Grid territory, it's western half, and majority of the city. It's not good.
Are at least the poles that they've released like contiguous to each other? Or are they just like random poles? You know, one pole, one in town, right? Not just one. I mean, is there any,
They're
you
part
know,
of
phase
that
or?
location. So they're mostly contiguous. But so.
I just,
Thomas,
what
I
you're
don't-
describing is just,
We're advising the county executive of
Yeah.
the situation.
yeah, because everybody's saying, no, it's you, and it takes a long time to sort out and force whoever the, the problem is to pay, and then what if they just don't and it ggets tied up?
Yeah,
in
well, we
lawsuit?
should, the news that we can take, that we taken some of them, we've also, we still go to the PSC.
Yes.
PSC, yeah.
Can bring
And-
this down. Say you caused the problems, Section wire.
That was one of
I mean,
the,
at a certain point, right? I mean, this seems like a stalemate, but grid ultimately becomes the decider in how much pressure they want to put on these users of their resource.
pressure can be applied. We started to, but we are by far not the only ones that are having these issues. And we're working through it, but we will take financial discussion and move on to, so.
So I believe there is a meeting this week. County executive to bring him up to speed. And then waiting here, does he want to make some inquiries with his grid contacts? Or is he all right if we pursue this with the PSC as a formal complaint? So that's where we're at. Other construction items, some underground construction going on right now, mainly in Amherst. Still waiting for accumulation of make-ready packages to clear from NYSEG. We still think that that's Boston to the Springville corridor. And now that Springville has given us the make-ready bill, they'll go forward, do their work, and then they'll actually have their work done before anyone else. So that's still our launch for that piece. And we will be doing some underground work, convention center. Still think that we can get fiber to the convention center. That is also.
So, but I think it's world's largest disco.
Yeah.
That's what, that's why.
That's what we're trying to do.
It's got the glitter.
But more importantly, they'll be able to, for all of their conventions, which has been such a struggle.
We have two RFPs that proposals were received on Friday of last week. One is for managed network service provider, so that for enterprises that need a lit service, they don't want dark fiber, they want a fiber with a network service included. So we put an RFP out for that managed service provider, and we also need fiber monitoring of our infrastructure, and that was a separate RFP. We have 4 responses for the managed service provider, and we had 2 responses on the fiber monitor. So all I can say is we're summarizing those proposal results, shortlisting to probably 1 or 2 candidates for each RFP, and be doing selection interviews. But what I'll say at this point, we have proposed solutions that are comprehensive, complete, and within our expected budget. So it's deciding between competing good solutions. But that's promising. But we won't have a recommendation until next October. And let's see. Yeah, just quickly on this, on the sales, they still look very bullish for us. We're waiting for Buffalo City School RFP to come out. The library, I believe, is still on schedule to release your E-rate RFP, and I think they were targeting November to have that out.
The Buffalo Public Schools, we've been talking about that for a while. I mean,
They just haven't released it yet.
No, there is some, I don't know if anyone followed it, but the Fifth Circuit Court ruled that E-rate is an unconstitutional charge because it hasn't been authorized by Congress. was an FCC imposed surcharge. Every school district, every library in America depends on E-rate funding for their broadband. So it's got to get fixed. Whether it's going to get fixed through Congress or it gets fixed through an appeals court, we don't know. But what we've been advised by other E-rate agencies is that it's business as usual until they come to a resolution.
We've had some concerns to E-rate to not approve the contract.
Excuse me?
You can't just recuse yourself from that particular?
It's like we're actually working with a third party provider that's assisting us with the application, so I can run it by them, but that was some concerns initially.
We did run that through Bob Mooney, our attorney, and he said that the only thing you'd have to do is recuse yourself from that decision completely, yeah. But I would run it through them as well.
So, and the library is another enterprise that is looking for a lit service, not a dark fiber solution. Budget.
We're gonna do a mix between the 5-year plan and the budget because they kind of coincide with each other. But why don't you guys get started and jump in?
Sure. So everybody has a copy of the budget here. What I've been doing and spending a lot of time on is looking at, what we originally looked at, the costs are going to be, kind of updating as we're having stuff come in. We're getting invoices. There's portions of, make ready where we can look at how much it costs and extrapolate that out. So really kind of fine tuning the costs. I will get to the punchline. The cost is higher than originally anticipated, and I would say it's driven mainly by make ready. And we talked a lot about NICEAG, but I'm putting in an estimate for National Grid. There's also some stuff that comes in from Verizon and Charter, so there's other costs out there. And looking at a sample and extrapolating, it's driven our costs to be up quite a bit. So looked at that, looked at what the operating costs have been, and what we think they're going to be ongoing. So really just kind of fine tuning what's out there. I can jump to the end if you'd like me to. What you'll see here, what we've got. First of all, there's a few things we got to adjust on this, and Mark's giving me a little homework. But that 2024 column that's on there right now, it isn't adopted as an estimated, so it's a portion of actuals this year and an estimation for the remainder of the year. And then the 2025 is, what we're proposing right now for budget. And as it stands right now, you can see that it's going to show a deficiency for the year. And so when you look at all this and you look at cash flow, based on all these numbers, you could be in a place where we're running very low on funds by the end of next year.
So this is where I will jump in a little bit. So there's the biggest area is the make ready, which we just talked about. In the numbers that you're going to see here, that we are taking a very conservative estimate on what that will cost us. And I personally think it's too high, and that's an area that we're going to be adjusting. So
Considerably high on grid. The NICEAG make ready has pretty much been turned.
Yeah.
Grid is still unknown.
Right.
They haven't told us.
But our numbers are more than double what we are paying actual for NICEAG. And we're talking, about a little over $5 million, where we're only going to probably be spending around, actually 7 million, I think we estimated here, where we're only going to be spending at the high end on NICEAG, 3.5 million. So there's some numbers that we're going to be adjusting that based off of more recent conversations with Grid and their reaction to the fact that, that their expectation, that was basically our number, given that Grid's expectation would be that we would replace all of those poles. I don't think we'll even agree to that, first of all. So we're going to adjust. That's one area that is the area really that has driven this, our money being expended quicker than we had originally thought. And we're going to adjust those numbers down. Just want to Make Ready is an area in which we'll be doing things, but we've had quite a bit of conversation with the audit and finance committee internally. What are other areas in which, if we were to come to this scenario, if we had to pay for all the pole replacement of grid, these are obviously extreme scenarios, and we were going to be somewhat running out of money next year. We have identified areas in which we probably can find $8.5 million, and I'll let Matt kind of talk about those where.
So we think we may have overestimated the grid make ready by as much as 3 billion. So we're gonna manage that as tight as we can. It's a balance, because the harder we do cost control, the longer it takes to get through the make ready. We need to get through the make ready, because I also think our revenue projections for our first year of operation conservatively low. I think we're gonna perhaps do 3.5 million more than what Fred's got in the budget right now. That also assumes we have our network fully built by 2025 and we can sell. Then we also looked at in the city of Buffalo, that it's pushed us over our 400 mile technically or something at this point. We looked at the overall routes and we identified about 23 miles, which represents
I
about.
need to interrupt.
Yep.
I use your charger.
Yes. Do you have the same kind that I use?
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I don't want to lose the stream.
So and these miles are what I would call non-essential miles. They're good to have. If we didn't have a budget issue, I would say we absolutely would build these miles. But if we were to either cut back, or what I suggest is we just delay, we don't commit to building those miles until we have a better handle on what our budget looks like. It won't compromise the network. We still get to every town and village and city in Erie County, but we wouldn't bring off some of the sub-ring. And this wouldn't affect our public safety architecture. But that's another 2 million. So 3.5 million in additional revenue, 3 million for make ready cost control, and 2 million for potential mileage reduction. That's a potential of 8.5 million. And we have a 3 million gap. There's also the option bond, which is very palatable, but it is an option.
We don't think we'll have to go anywhere near.
So,
With any of this potential Connect All funding, fund that, or is it Connect All money for other future expansions outside of what we're currently proposing?
it would help revenue.
For the affordable housing piece.
Okay.
So if the affordable housing allowed us to lease out $100,000 a year more fiber, that's a good thing.
The future projects that I talked about, the potential programming in December would be additional builds. It's my guess. Yeah.
So we really just want to bring this to your attention that the ARPA money is being spent quickly. And I think we've been conservative, and Fred was even thinking that, the gap may not really manifest itself until 2026. Either way, the day is coming with an ARPA cushion is going to be spent. And we've known all along that we need 2 or 3 years to launch ErieNet to get revenues up to a point where we're covering our operation expenses. And so we're going to have to accelerate that. And right now, the sales look good, but we'll have to stay very focused on that. And continue as tight a cost control as we can do. And look at opportunities for other funding that's coming out. That usually means, though, if you get additional funding, we have to build more. And build more means we need construction dollars.
I think the one thing I would add too is you can see on the screen, but also if you go to the last page of your budget report, you're seeing the excess or deficiency of revenues, and you certainly see for 25 a $2.9 million gap, for 26 a $1.1 million gap, but you're also seeing for 23 $860,000, 861 surplus, and a expected 2.1 for 2024. Well, that's all ARPA money just the same, and especially in this early time when all of the funds that ErieNet have is essentially deferred revenue. That money is going to carry forward, and essentially, if you add those two numbers together, you get 2,990. 988,015, which basically plugs the 2025 gap. Now that is making an assumption based on where we think we're going to end 2024. But as was noted, really the beginning point of where ErieNet needs to find operational reoccurring sustainability is somewhere at the very end of 2025 or into 2026. And that's something that, everyone who's been here since the very beginning, that's kind of where we estimated that point in time. The good news is, we're seeing, looking at 2025, we're seeing, on page 1, these are all the operating revenues. Those go from a big goose egg to increasing amounts over time and straight on through 2029 as the 5-year plan. So there is that opportunity where we are going to be developing these sort of reoccurring revenue to deal with the reoccurring expenses. It's just really identifying right now for ourselves, the board, and ErieNet as the organization, where that inflection point is between moving from the construction project that is ErieNet to the operating organization that is ErieNet. And that, as was expected, and now we're getting closer to that date, is going to be somewhere between the end of 2025 and into 2026. And that's sort of what everybody is working towards, is, being able to bridge that gap and identify, a number of additional gap closers that could be used should they be necessary. These are I think, generally speaking, pretty conservative budget estimates. So what that means is the expenses are probably closer to worst case overstated expenses, and the revenues are closer to worst case understated. So this really what we're trying to show at this point, which will change for the final version that the board ultimately approves, is we're showing that there is a gap for 2025, or a possible one. That gap is going to be closed, and it's going to be a balanced budget for 2025. And then they'll be identified what are being used as those sort of gap closers. But this was, meant to be sort of a working draft to show where everyone was right now in the process.
So if we look at the inflection point of getting to operating late 25, early 26, is it fair to say that our biggest risk for not meeting that is the grid make ready work? If that gets pushed off, that's just going to push off everything, right?
It's a little bit of both.
It would hold our bill, which would cost money.
Yeah. I mean, in the double-edged sword of it, yes, it delays our ability to bring in revenues, but we're also not seeing as many costs because of that delays
You can't get into operation
Right,
until
until it's
that
done.
make ready work is done. So the way I look at it is
Yeah.
the make ready work is our
Yeah.
Achilles heel right now.
Unfortunately, part of this grid mapping, if I'm correct, is we have to do some grid to get to some of this nice end.
Okay.
I'm right in saying that.
Yeah, it's not a straight line.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
It's a big delay. I mean, it will cost us money. I get what you're saying. We're not spending the money, but we're not,
Cost us
we have no ability
Yeah,
to
there's opportunity.
maybe even get through some of the contracts we're already working, so it's. The ideal would be that Rich just moves along.
So if in the alternative case that the board decides to submit a complaint to PSC, does that grind everything to a halt? I mean, with that's either force them to do something or it's gonna get,
Or halted than we are, well, I should knock on wood when I say that, but, it is always a possibility when we complain that it stops. And we gave that message. We want to work with you. We don't want to formalize complaints. We want to figure out a solution. We need to move forward. This is costing, taxpayer money, even though we don't. Well, it is.
It is.
Federal funding. So we're asking for them to work with us. In the conversation we had, it seems like that's their goal as well. But of course, in that time frame, we've only had maybe 100.
And I think by alerting the PSC of the situation, that they become aware of it if they're not already. I think they are.
Coming, letting them know.
And if they are,
I think
and it may, reversely, it may help Grid to then work with the PSC for a solution. Because Grid's gonna, one way or another, they're gonna figure a way to pass on these costs. And my suspicion is they'll pass it on in the annual pool attachment fees as they charge the different providers. And so they may very well absorb the make ready cost, but ErieNet could see higher attachment fees in future years. That's one possible scenario. I don't know how else the PSC steps in.
the better part of that solution though could be that, it would drive up our costs, obviously our customers, but it would probably equally drive up our competitors' costs as well, because we'd all be paying the increase. So we wouldn't have to have it on our end. But we're stuck with the make ready because they want us to pay that. And we can't go to someone else and say, no, you pay it, or let's split it between everyone then.
Wouldn't PSC, if they were gonna recoup those costs through the annual pole attachment fee, wouldn't they only charge those fees to the violators? You wouldn't
That's
think
the problem.
they wouldn't attach.
The problem is getting the violators to agree that they're in violation, or it was their action that caused the violation. And
That's
it's
just
not that they
becoming like
want,
grid, right?
yeah, it's the
can-
time it takes to determine that. That's what,
Because they didn't
That's
do
what
the
we're
inspection,
paying.
they didn't do the post inspection. Ripple effect. So yeah, so Mark was right. So when you see this budget for approval next month, it will be a balanced budget, and we'll have a note that indicates where we pull from, a combination of surplus. We were less conservative on our make ready costs. We'll make sure that you see that, but of the solutions we gave you, those will be the areas in which we. Questions from the board, how about we do that? Yes,
We're gonna have a revenue stream by the end of 2025.
we will,
we will begin earning revenue in
towards the end.
Yeah, the 25.
third quarter earliest. We're coming at 4, then 26.
That's assuming we can work through the grid, make ready work.
I have a question on the polls. I heard this, someone from NICEAG, I think, told me this, not sure. Anyway, when we hang our cable on poles, there's a snowstorm that takes the cable down. Whose responsibility is to deattach our cables to the pole?
If it's our cable that's down, ErieNet dispatches one, and we'll have utility contractors that are on call and they have to perform within X number of hours, they'll be attached to the cable. If it's a traffic accident and it takes the pole out, then probably the pole owner replaces it, and there may be prorated charges that come back to whoever's attached to that pole.
That was one of the reasons why this person was telling me why they're reluctant to give those poles to us.
Well, there's more attachers than ever before. It used to be cable TV, Verizon, and then you had electric above. And now you have several telecom carriers, several ISP carriers, ErieNet. And so those poles are busier. And yeah, I don't think the utility companies, because they're primarily charged with delivering power. And so they look at telecom as a nuisance. But at the end of the day, it's the public that's paid for these poles. And we paid for the replacement of these poles 20 times over. That money's been spent years ago.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think a point maybe in that to bring up too is, going forward, we are going to, once the actual development of the ErieNet system is finished, it doesn't mean that construction or capital costs for ErieNet end. We're going to have reoccurring capital costs going in the future, which are going to be, in the two categories of one, future expansion, however that may be, and then reoccurring maintenance. So that's going to be one of those areas too, as part of this transition, is being able to, not only be able to meet our recurring operational expenses, but to be able to have sufficient capital or other, opportunities for resources to be able to deal with those annual sort of maintenance concerns as well.
I think Fred's 5-year plan shows that ErieNet's annual operating, after we're built and we're operating at about $3 million a year. So we need to be making $3.5–4 million a year in revenue to cover that. And we have to have, so it's this deficit, but we also have to build capital reserve fund so that as we have new opportunities that come up and that requires build, we have capital reserves for the build costs. Because, customers pay for the build, but generally we'll have to spread it out over a period of time. So we'll put the cost of money on there, but for ErieNet to collect that revenue, it can take a 5-year lease or a certain agreement to recover those build costs.
Yeah, I think depending upon your point of view, this could be good or bad. There are a lot of grant opportunities out there, and they tend to be focused primarily on capital and not on operating. So that is sort of an opportunity going forward, which I think will be increasing over time, is our ability to leverage the progress we have on our network compared to other communities across the state to be able to leverage, those grant opportunities that are going to be out there. We mentioned, the Connect All. Well, although that is a bit of a disappointment at this point in time, I think that's emblematic of the opportunities that are going to be out there and are going to be recurring over the next several years that we can't necessarily budget for right now, but we know they're kind of out there in the periphery.
Yep. And that would be an ideal situation for a bond. If we get to the point where future funding comes available, it's for a build, there's not a grant out there where they hand you $34 million like the county did for this. we have to spend and then be reimbursed. And so that's where we would like to use those opportunities for that type of borrowing. Other question? So basically, I think I might have explained a little bit in the beginning. If you take this home, you look at it, you have questions, please contact us. We'll be meeting again. We'll be filling in that $2.9 million budget gap. You'll see that referenced in October. The Audit and Finance Committee, gave us some things for us to look at and adjust as well. Not big things, but the big one is making that a zero balance or the balance budget. And so they will meet one more time in October prior to the October board meeting, and they'll make a recommendation at that point for the board to approve. In October, then you would make that decision on approving the budget, and we submit it by October 31st to ABO, which is a requirement for us to do. And we'll be all set with the budget process. Okay. But in the meantime, like I said, if you have questions or concerns, or you want any conversation on it, please feel free to reach out. We'll work through that. All right.
All right. In the back to the time, I think we pretty much covered 5 and 7.
Yes.
There.
Yeah.
Okay. To those, there's no unfinished business on number 6. Then we'll move right into the resolutions for this afternoon. The first resolution, 2024-17, is in Matt's report. It was reflective of the DOT requirements. So I'll go through resolution of the ErieNet Local Development Corporation authorizing the expenditure of additional funds not to exceed $107,419 pursuant to that certain agreement by and between the corporation and the DDS companies, the furtherance of the completion of certain professional engineering services, and 2, the negotiation and execution of an amendment to the agreement between the corporation and DDS to contemplate the additional authorized expenditure amount. Motion.
Motion.
Second. Discussed it, but any last points, Mike, or any questions on that, or any questions? All in favor? Any opposed, any abstentions? Motion carried. 2024-18, also a match report about the underground infrastructure construction services. Resolution of the ErieNet Local Development Corporation authorizing the expenditure of additional funds not to exceed $728,000 pursuant to that certain agreement by and between corporation and NC Utilities, and furtherance of the completion of certain underground infrastructure construction services, and 2, the negotiation and execution of amendment to the agreement between the corporation and NC to contemplate additional authorized expenditure. Now, motion. Second. Dan Castle. Any questions, discussion?
I don't think I touched on this.
I think.
Underground,
Yeah.
that's where MNC needs an additional 5 months authorization.
Yeah.
We knew they were going to need the 5 miles. We had budgeted for MNC 10 miles of underground construction. We only authorized the first 5 because we wanted to see how it went. They've been performing well. They're holding their rates, and we've committed for the first 5. We haven't spent all the money. We've committed the money, and we need to keep them moving forward for an additional 5 months.
More questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions? Motion carried. This one I know we did not talk about. Bank one, so 2024-19, resolution of the Local Development Corporation authorizing the negotiation and execution of certain pledge agreement by and between the corporation and NC. May I have a motion? Motion. All right, Melissa.
So this is, if you recall, last year we had to have a $500,000 bond or letter of credit for Verizon in order to hang our fiber on their poles. And so we did that last year, and we were supposed to, the bank, I should say, we did what we were supposed to do, but the bank was supposed to move $500,000 to a separate account. Their recommendation for us this year is to just go ahead and leave that, 500,000 in the investments. And, that's what we've opted to do, but we need the board's, blessing to be able to say that that's the pledge that we're gonna be leaving it in we're gonna be leaving 500,000 in investments, so it continues to increase, not move it to a separate account.
Questions? Take it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions? Motion carries. Resolution 2024-20 was the construction work that Matt definitely talked about, since spring bill. So resolution of the ErieNet Local Development Corporation authorizing the expenditure of funds not to exceed $134,447 in furtherance of the completion of certain make-ready construction work or the attachment of certain fiber optic cable and supporting equipment upon within the village of Springville infrastructure. Have a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Who's second, John?
John. Any discussion, further discussion? Take it to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposition and abstentions, motion carries. This is the infamous City of Buffalo license agreement. 2024-21. Resolution of the ErieNet Local Development Corporation authorizing one, the negotiation and execution of certain telecommunications license agreements by and between corporation and the City of Buffalo, and two, authorize the expenditure of funds as described here in the furtherance of the completion of certain capital improvements on behalf of the city to connect certain city-owned facilities to the open access network, subject to city's tolling waiver of the payment of the permanent security fund and annual license fees provided for in the license agreement respectively. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Eating. Second. Second. Any discussion?
Just to follow that, basically what it's saying is, as you recall, we agreed to do 2.1 million to connect their 45 sites. They have agreed to waive their annual license, and there's initial license fees, which exceeds the 2.1. Just want to remind everybody what you agreed.
Nothing else? Take it to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed and abstentions? Motion carries. And last but not least, this is the NICEAG make ready cost that will be returned to ErieNet. This is resolution 2024-2022. Resolution of the ErieNet Local Development Corporation authorizing one, the expenditure of additional funds not to exceed $10,186,459 in furtherance of the completion of certain make-ready fiber optic infrastructure construction services related to NICEAG infrastructure, and two, the negotiation and execution of amendments to the master services agreement between the corporation and Northland Utilities, Thayer Power and Communications, Holland Group, Harlan Electric Company, Delaware Power Services, and H. Richardson and Sons to increase the contract sum thereunder for provision make ready construction services related to the NICEAG infrastructure. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second. Speakers, any discussions? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? Any exceptions? Any separation? All right, nothing else?
Motion to adjourn.
There you go. Second. All in favor?
That was a quick motion.
5 minutes early.
Our next board meeting is October 15th. Same place. Thank you.
Yeah, why is she not here? Oh, baby's been delivered.